All right, you're the owner of a company, a CEO, some kind of a senior leader, and you have someone on your team who's capable, smart, and valuable, but there's a serious issue. There's a problem that you have to address. Maybe they're underperforming in some way, maybe they're creating some kind of conflict, maybe they're a high performer, but their behavior somehow, whatever it is, it's damaging the team. You know you need to say something, but you're worried that the conversation will damage the relationship, might trigger defensiveness, might cause them to leave. Who knows what's going to happen? Here's the truth. More relationships are damaged by avoiding hard conversations than by having them. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the right way to confront a senior leader on your team so that the conversation is clear, respectful, and actually creates change. I'm not talking about every legal, ethical, or extreme scenario. I'm talking about the common executive leadership problems of a valuable leader whose behavior or performance needs to change in some way. So confrontation, when you have to deal with some kind of problematic behavior or attitude or whatever the performance issue, whatever the thing is, that's not fun. Nobody, in my experience, likes to do it if they're a healthy human being because they're concerned about relationships and they're concerned about, that things work well and that they feel well. And those are normal, healthy, rational human being concerns. But if we don't address things in a timely way, and we do what most leaders do, which is avoid issues until they become so big we can't avoid them anymore, and then the emotional justification is there and we do whatever we do to handle it, that tends to actually make things worse. And so what I want to introduce here is a process that significantly increases the likelihood of a successful conversation that produces successful results. And I have been working with this process with leaders for many, many years, and it works. It is a very useful tool. It's like a lot of the tools that I teach, nothing is 100% guaranteed, but it works with most leaders most of the time. Costs you nothing, absolutely worth taking the chance on, and there's very little downside to you incorporating the process that I'm going to introduce to you here. Now, here's the big thing. Why these conversations are so hard or feel so hard is typically, for all of us, we have our own backstories with conflict, whatever those stories are. The family that we were raised in, the school that we went to, the community that we were raised in. For most people all over the world, our experiences with conflict were negative. And so a confrontation where I have to confront someone else's behavior, even though that isn't necessarily a conflict, it feels like conflict. And psychologically, we tend to relate to it as if it were the same thing. And so the idea that conflict itself is something that we might be entering into on purpose, for most of us, our experiences with conflict is going to create the end of something. It's going to be the end of a relationship. It's going to be the end of a good feeling. It's going to be the end of a good experience. It's going to be the end of something. And we don't often have historically positive experiences of having difficult conversations and seeing those be transformative and seeing those actually help us grow an organization, grow a relationship, become healthier, become more resilient, become more robust. Because of that, when there's a scenario where confrontation is the right response, it's the appropriate response, it's what a leader should be doing, we tend to not do that, or we wait too long, or we fumble the ball, or we try to find some other way of handling a situation. And this is just common. My first book's called Conflict and Leadership, and I wrote specifically because of some experiences I had dealing with conflict. Early in my career, I was researching peace-building processes and peace-building strategies that might be used in Eastern Africa in a war zone that I was working in over there. And the team that I was researching with, we got into, primarily myself and the other leader of the team, got into a conflict with each other, and the team actually split. And the irony of that, the ridiculousness of that scenario, there's a bigger story around that, but the basic elements of that impacted me so much that I began trying to figure out, how do I handle these things differently, because I didn't know how to handle that situation, and neither did anyone around us. And so the solutions I'm going to introduce here do work. They will help you. They are dramatically more likely to help you get a positive outcome than probably whatever else you were trying to do. So basically the solution, or the answer to the question why these things feel so hard, or why does it seem like it's so unlikely, is because in our minds we think this is harder than it actually is. We get worried about the what ifs. We get worried about their defensiveness and how we might handle that. We get worried about, what if they leave? What if they quit on us? What if they sabotage something? What if they take some of our team with us, or they take customers with them? What if the relationship changes in some way that I don't like? What if I say it wrong? What if I goof this thing up? There's endless what ifs that can be out there. And it's the what ifs, the fear of the thing that might happen, that actually prevents us from having a needed conversation which can actually preserve the relationship ultimately and make it stronger and help that individual grow. All of these positive benefits are restricted, or we don't experience them because of fears that maybe something negative will happen. Here's the reality. This is just this plain leadership talk reality. If you feel like you need to confront the leader, it's because something not ideal is already going on. And it's probably bigger than you think. In most cases, it might not be. You might be overblowing it. You might be exaggerating things. But oftentimes the problem is bigger than what most people have fully appreciated. And if it's unaddressed, it just tends to grow. It rarely resolves itself. In my experience, let's just sit and wait this thing out. Let time try to resolve it. Not that it can't ever work. It doesn't often work. And so it's not usually the best approach. And it definitely doesn't help drive growth in the other individual. So the goal is not to avoid discomfort. This is where leaders really have to be courageous and be willing to make decisions not based off of how they feel, but based off of what actually will produce the greatest outcomes for relationships and for the organization. The goal is, how do we enter these kinds of conversations intentionally, understanding how to do it, and in a way that retains elements of respect, so that we're being clear, but we're also being respectful, and we're helping set the conditions where there can be growth and there can be change and there can be good dialogue between us and the other individual. So here's where these conversations tend to go wrong, is they tend to go wrong. A very classic scenario is something happens, we get frustrated, maybe we even jump to judgment or our own interpretation of what's going on, and we react out of that emotionally. That emotional, maybe it's a distancing, or we get loud, or whatever our response is to the other individual. They experience the emotion. They're not paying attention to the substance behind why we have that emotion. In most cases, they're just feeling, oh, you're really angry with me, you're avoiding me, you're giving me the silent treatment, you're becoming punitive, whatever that they're feeling. And because of that emotional dynamic, which it may be justified, and you're a human being, so you're going to feel emotions. But in this case, when they drive our response, that tends to be the thing that the other side, the other person, sees or feels the most. And they'll almost always say that emotion is not justified. That's going to be the typical response. Or they'll feel like it just complicates things. That's what happens. The other side, or the other reasons why these conversations often don't work, is we're too vague. We'll say things that don't really make sense. We'll say that you don't have a good attitude. Well, I don't know what that means exactly. You don't have a good work ethic. What is a good work ethic? Can you define that? How would you recognize it? There's all sorts of ways that we can tend to describe things that don't make sense to people. And so it makes it easy to argue if they're defensively oriented. It also makes it very hard for them to correct. Oftentimes, the frustration is subjective. In other words, we feel like somebody's not performing the way we want them to perform. We feel like they're not showing us the respect that we feel like we deserve. We feel like these things are happening, but we can't objectively point our finger on, here's exactly what you're doing that's creating a problem. That makes it very hard to confront without it seeming like it's just coming from, we woke up on the wrong side of the bed. It also makes it very hard for them to correct or change, because they don't necessarily know what's bothering us or what the appropriate behavior or attitude would look like. Oftentimes, if this has been waited on before you confront, it's become personalized. It's not just the behavior that I have an issue with. Now I'm frustrated with that person. When I see them in the morning, I feel tense, I feel anxiety, I feel angry, I feel whatever the thing is that I feel, and now it's a personalized dynamic. And so it's harder to make it objective, it's hard to make it substantive when we've personalized it in that way. And then, as I've been alluding to in other statements, we're not clear about the desired change that we want. We basically just say some form of, I'm not happy, make me happy, and they don't know what to do with that. And so understandably, that often doesn't work that well. So examples of poor versions is to just tell somebody you have a bad attitude, or that you're hard to work with, or that people are frustrated with you. These are all legitimate things to feel. but they don't really articulate to that individual what the issue is. Why are they frustrated with me? Why am I hard to work with? What is it about my attitude that you don't like? The conversations don't go anywhere. And you've all been in those conversations probably, or at least seen you have a friend who's been in those conversations, and you've seen them not work. And so what makes it easier is if you can be specific about, here's what happened, here's the impact, objectively, here's what happened, here's the impact of what you did, and here's what needs to change. Specifically, here's the changes that I'm looking for. And when you frame it in that way, it becomes easier for people to follow through on that. And so what I want to suggest to you is that it's really the leader's job to make feedback consumable in some way, to make it so that the person you're talking to can do something with it. Then it goes from venting to a true coaching, mentoring conversation that creates the opportunity for somebody to actually grow. So you want to stay objective enough to be fair, you want to be direct enough to be useful, and you want to be respectful enough to try to preserve the relationship if that's possible. So objective, direct, and respectful. Those are the three ingredients that you want to try to hit when you're communicating to somebody. Now I want to back up a little bit. If you need to confront somebody, it sure helps if there's positive relational background for that conversation. If you're confronting somebody that you never talk to or that you have a bad relationship with, it's going to be a more difficult conversation. But if you have a positive relationship with this individual, then they're more likely to be open to hear you. And I want to talk about 3 different ingredients that you need to have in this relationship that causes people to be more open and to be more likely to listen to you than not. And I think you'll see this as I explain them. So the first thing is you need to be viewed by the individual you're talking to as credible. They need to see you as someone who has integrity, someone who walks the walk, someone who lives out the behavior that you want to see in other people, that you're not expecting something from someone else that you don't do yourself. And in other ways, you need to be viewed as a credible leader. They need to be able to trust in you, in your character, and your decision making. It just doesn't mean perfect, but it means that you have to be trustworthy to them. They have to feel like they can trust you. The second thing is they need to believe that you care about them, that the whole point of your confrontation isn't to just stop something that's bugging you or just to deal with a risk issue, but you actually care about them and you want their best. When they believe that, because when you go to confront them, they're going to have their own conflict response most likely, which tends to fall into, there's various ways of handling it, but shorthand, people fall into fight, flight, or freeze type responses. There's also fawning and there's other F words that people use for conflict. A lot of that is mitigated if people feel like you care about them. Then all of a sudden they can get past the fear. They can get past that I need to defend myself. They can get past the I need to, kiss up and do all these different things, and they can start to listen to you in a different way. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be flawless. Doesn't mean that their response is going to be perfect, but it improves the likelihood of all of it. And that's only something that you can do if you've already built that relational basis. The last thing that you need to have is you need to be competent in your own job. And so they need to view you as a competent leader. So this is just basic good stuff if you're a leader to practice anyways. Be a credible person, be a trustworthy person, be a caring person. Doesn't mean you have to be super soft and cuddly all the time. I don't know that I'm viewed that way, but I think my clients and the people that work with me know that I care about them and I want their best interests. I want to see them succeed. And so if I have to be direct with clients, which I often have to be, they know it's coming from a place of I want to see them succeed, and that's why I'm saying this. And they have to view you as competent. They have to view you as someone that you understand your own job. So you're not just critiquing my performance. Your own performance is also, where it needs to be. If all of these things are in place, they're likely to listen to you. If any one of these is weak, it's going to be harder. So my encouragement is another way, if you want to get into like fancy conversations around this, you can call this political capital. So you've built the capacity to be able to have hard conversations where you need to spend down some of your capital, your bank account of goodwill. If you have all of these things, they put deposits into that bank account. If you have to have hard conversations, you have to make tough decisions, you do withdrawals from the bank account, you want to make sure you have a pretty full bank account of this credibility, care, and competency so that when you need to do tough things, which happens, people feel like, okay, this is somebody I trust, I respect them, I respect their capacity, and I think they care about us. And so this was hard to hear, this was a tough conversation, but I'm willing to listen to them, or I'm willing to entertain what they're saying. If you don't have any of these, A, start working on it, hire a coach if you need that. The second thing, though, is if you need to have this conversation quickly and you haven't built one of these, maybe you're a new leader, maybe you're working on an area yourself, what I would do is borrow somebody else's. Let's say you're viewed as credible and competent, you're technically really good at what you do, and you have, solid character and you're consistent, but people aren't really sure that you care. Maybe you tend to be very, just performance oriented and goal driven, and you haven't taken time to invest in relationships. Now you're wishing you had, hopefully. And so what you might do is in your confrontation, you might, if it's appropriate, bring somebody with you who is of the appropriate level in the organization, who is known to care about that person. And so you're borrowing somebody else's character, really, if you haven't built that yourself. So you're borrowing their relational status. You might bring in somebody if you haven't been consistent. You either haven't had an opportunity to demonstrate competency or you've goofed somewhere yourself. Part of it's acknowledging that, but you might bring somebody into the conversation who has the kind of competency that this person would respect, and then the both of you together have this conversation with them. It's not easy. I'm not pretending it's easy, but also not doing anything is going to lead to another set of not easy decisions that you are no longer influencing or controlling. And it's really becomes, at that point, if you don't start addressing things, your opportunity to turn things around and to create strength or to create a positive solution out of a difficult scenario goes way down. And so this is really only for courageous leaders that are willing to do the right thing, even when that's uncomfortable. Then you can begin to restore relationships and turn things around in organizations. If you don't want to do that, good luck. All right, so here's an example. Let's say there's Tommy. Tommy has been working on a project. Tommy is very, very good at what he does. He's been able to execute this project very well, very high performance standards, but Tommy's a little bit of a jerk. And that's an ambiguous term, but that's how he's being defined by people. He's sarcastic when he talks to people. He can be critical. He can cut people off. And so what's happened is your clients have said, we would like to do more work with your company, but we're not going to work with Tommy anymore. And in fact, people on Tommy's team have said the same thing. We would like to continue to work with you, but if I have to be on Tommy's team, I'm going to go find a job someplace else. So this isn't just a personality conflict in some way. This now becomes a business issue because you're at risk of losing your customers and you're at risk of losing other people on your team because of how Tommy chooses to relate. Now, Tommy's skilled, Tommy, and maybe Tommy's a good guy just generally, but in certain responses, certain scenarios, has this way of relating, which just creates friction and is not showing respect to other people. And that needs to change. And if Tommy's going to advance in his career at all, this is going to be a massive handicap for him. And so if you're able to help him recognize this and change, you've done him a great service, as well as yourself, kind of that enlightened self-interest. I've been able to help him, but it also helps us. It's a win-win scenario. And so if you handle this scenario or situation well, you have the opportunity to really turn things around and actually give Tommy a different future, really. So it can be a big, big deal if you do this well. And if you don't do it well, here's the thing. He doesn't respond well. He doesn't handle it. Tommy, if he's being sarcastic enough and not relating people respectfully enough where nobody wants to work with him, he's already on this path of toxicity and destruction. Let's call it what it is, where his career is somehow going to be undermined by himself in some way. Not great if this is happening under your watch. And so what I'm saying is if he chooses not to respond well to you, you're going to end up in the same place otherwise or anyways of him not being someone you can work with. whether you keep him there and nobody wants to work with him, or you finally have to let him go, that's where it's going anyways. And so what you're trying to do is avert that kind of disaster, and you're giving him an opportunity to change. So it's a service to him, just requires some effort on your side. A lot of leaders avoid these conversations because they were never taught how to handle conflict well. And frankly, it's scary. I wrote Conflict in Leadership to give leaders a practical way to understand conflict, to navigate difficult conversations, and to lead with both courage and respect. If this is an area that you want to grow in, I put a link to the book in the description below. And if this video is useful, please like and subscribe. I create videos for owners and CEOs and senior leaders who are trying to build healthier, stronger, and more valuable companies. And by you liking and subscribing, it helps other people find videos that I create. So here's how I recommend doing this. And you may have seen similar models to this, but let me just walk you through it. So I like to begin with an affirmation. This has to be genuine. If it's like, hey, I like your outfit today, or something they don't care about, or something that feels false, it's not gonna work. They're gonna see right through that. But if you go to Tommy and say, Tommy, I think you're excellent at what you do. You handled that project in terms of your performance and in terms of timelines and the way you managed the budget on that. It was amazing. You went above and beyond. Super proud of you. You did really great, but we have to deal with something. And then that is where you describe objectively what they did. And this is behavior. So what I don't do is say your attitude is this, your attitude is that, because that's interpretive. I may feel like they have an egotistical attitude or a disrespectful attitude, but I don't really know what they're thinking. I just know how I experience it. But I'm experiencing a behavior of some kind. And this can be a little bit tricky to do, but you want to learn how to do that, is to describe what's the specific behavior that causes us to feel like this is a difficult person to work with, who has the attitude, whatever the attitude is. And so in this case, it might be the sarcastic comments. It might be cutting people off and not letting them finish speaking. It might be talking over other people. It might be correcting people publicly for things that should have been corrected privately. Whatever the specific behavior, rolling your eyes, body language, and you want to describe the specific body language. You want to objectively describe when you do this. So it's a when you behavior, and this is objective. It has to be objective. Here's why you do this, for a couple of reasons. One is when you objectively describe it, it's very hard to argue with. Right? I can argue all day long about your interpretation of my attitude, but if you say, when you have these conversations, 5 people say you tend to roll your eyes and then cut them off. I mean, I can argue with that, but 5 people have had this experience with me. And so it makes it difficult to argue, which is what you don't want to be in, is an argument. You want to say, this is objectively what's going on. That's a problem. Then you talk about, think through my whiteboarding here. You describe objectively what's going on, then you describe the consequences or impact. So you basically say, look, Tommy, I think you did excellent on that project, but you tend to be sarcastic. We've had both customers come to us and the team, and they feel like you're sarcastic. They feel like you cut them off. They feel like you don't listen to their input. And this is what they're telling me. And I've heard this from 5 or 6 different people, and they've given me the same or very similar descriptions. This is objective, and this is the impact, is the customers have told us they don't want to work with you again. So you want to be objective in this, but you can also be subjective. So objectively, I've had 2 customers say they won't work with us again if you're on their project. And I've had 4 of your team say they're not going to work with us again or work with you again on a project. And they've asked to be, transferred elsewhere, or they said they're going to look for another job. Incidentally, I run into actual scenarios that are just like this. Maybe you've experienced it as well, but this is not, it's not a crazy scenario. It happens. Now, on the subjective side, you can say they feel disrespected, or I feel frustrated, or it bothers me that I have to get in and have to deal with all of this because I'm not focusing on work. So you can talk about both because you've based the confrontation around this objective observation. And then I would actually have whatever you feel like the impacts are of that. So they understand that they may think it's okay how they're relating, but nobody else does, or you don't. And so it needs to change because of this impact. Then what I would describe as a clear path to resolution. How do you fix it? And so what I would tell Tommy, what I need you to do is, you're valuable. I think you're one of the smartest guys we've had doing this kind of work, but we need to work on the way you relate to people. And so if you're willing, what I need you to do is to go back to those 2 customers, and I need you to go back to your team, and I'd like you to acknowledge that you did not relate to them in the best way. I would like you to apologize for that. And then I would like you to work on how you listen to people. I would like you to withhold the sarcastic comments and to not make them at all. I know it may seem like humor, it may seem like a witty observation, you might feel impatient or frustrated. I need you to learn to deal with that and communicate differently, specifically whatever the scenario is. So if it's sarcasm, for example, I need you to just not make those comments. And maybe what we can do is have a handful of meetings. You'll talk to people afterwards and ask them, have 1 or 2 people that you trust, was I being sarcastic in that meeting? And so you're getting some kind of input back on that. Whatever your solution is, it should be very clear to both of you what they need to do so that they can start working on this. For many people, we have little behavioral quirks that we're not always aware of. And so when people say that needs to change, our lack of awareness makes it difficult to change unless we're specific about this is the change that we want to see. Then the last part of this is to affirm the person again. And the idea here is to say, look, Tommy, again, we value you. You're an important part of this team. You do fantastic work. You've got enormous potential here if we can work through your relational dynamics and how you relate to people, and that people feel respected when they're around you. And you can just end the conversation with that dynamic. So if you walk in, you affirm them genuinely, can't be made up stuff, can't be nonsense stuff. And here's the thing, if you're so frustrated with the individual that it's very hard for you to think of anything that you can affirm them for, you do need to wonder why they're still there. That just has to be a reasonable question at that point. But if you're just in a state of mind where it's like, I can't think of anything positive to say, then what I encourage that you do is affirm the potential relationship. Tommy, I think you've got a lot of potential here. I think we can get you there, kind of thing. Tommy, I think that you could really grow in this place, and I look forward to things working really well and great leadership on your team. It's a forward-facing affirmation of a possible positive future is a way that you can handle it if you can't think of anything specific right now. Here's why you do the affirmations. At the beginning, you don't want to just come in loaded for bear and start shooting, because they're going to get defensive or they're going to shut down. You just have to expect that. And so, or they're going to just say whatever they need to say to get the conversation over with. So you want to come in saying, I want to work with you. This is a scenario where I'm not here threatening you. I am here to help create a change. You describe everything, you work through this process, and then you affirm them again because it feels weird after these conversations. They feel weird, you might feel weird. What do you say to each other in the hallway, 20 minutes later? And so what you want to do is say, I'm on your side. Some form of, we're in this together. I want to see you get through this. I want to see you succeed, however you frame that. And so don't feel like that things are necessarily threatened, even if there is some sort of like, you got to get this figured out or this isn't going to work out. So that's the basic outline that I recommend. It works really well. And if you feel like I'm not going to be able to remember all of that, that's okay. Write it down. I have watched people in conversations confrontations that I've been asked to sit in on, where they actually read it to the person that they're talking to, and it comes across as the person that's presenting this is being very thoughtful and very deliberate and very intentional. It doesn't come across as they don't know what to do, they don't know what to say, they needed notes. I need notes. People need notes. And so it's okay to write this down if you feel like that'll help you. So what do you do if they push back? There's a couple of things. First of all, it depends on how objective or how accurate or complete our data is. And so what I would recommend is you stay calm, you stay objective with things, don't get pulled into an emotional escalation. I don't want to get into too big of an aside here, but there's interesting neural research around mirror neurons. And what happens is the person that's perceived as more authoritative in a relational dynamic tends to set a tone. And so if you come in and your tone is on a more calm space, the other side is likely to come down and match where you're at. If you escalate, they're likely to come up where you're at. So you come in, you start to say, hey, Tommy, really appreciate the work you did on that project, but there's been some complaints and we need to talk about those. And you see Tommy escalate. If you escalate with Tommy, Tommy's leading the conversation now, not you. And so what you want to do is keep yourself down and bring Tommy down with you. And you can be very honest about this. I was personally very impacted. This was decades ago. A mentor of mine and I got into an argument, and we had never argued before. So that already surprised me. And we were arguing about something, and he stopped in the middle of it, and he said, I don't understand why I'm responding to you the way I am right now. I'm going to stop this conversation. We're going to come back to this, but I need to go away and figure out my reaction right now. This to me blew me away. It was the most mature response I had ever seen to somebody that he wasn't being dishonest. He wasn't denying his frustration with me or whatever he was experiencing. He also wasn't saying, we're not going to talk about this, we're ending the conversation. So he reaffirmed his relationship. We're going to come back to this conversation, but he was acknowledging he couldn't handle it in that moment and he needed to step away. I also couldn't handle it in that moment, but I didn't have the maturity to acknowledge that. By seeing him do that, it's helped me do that later in life, following that scenario. So if somebody pushes back to you, this is data about them and their maturity level and their ability to listen and to receive. But I would ask them questions. Instead of getting into an argument, I would ask them, how do you see what's going on? Tommy, these people have said you're sarcastic and you're disrespectful to them and you tend to cut them off in conversations. And Tommy says, that's not true. It's like, well, Tommy, help me explain. What do you think they're seeing? How do you see what's going on? Or ask them, what do you think I'm missing in this? What is it that I don't know that if I knew it, it would help me see this differently? Or you could ask them, what part of this do you disagree with? Or is there another explanation that I need to understand? Many times when people have to answer those questions, they start to realize there is no other really good explanation. This is if they're a person of character and the person you want to retain on their team. On the other hand, if you know objectively this person has been acting this way, this is why the objective framing is so crucial. And you know that they're saying that never happened. I was always so, respectful to them, and I brought them donuts and I was super nice to them and I did all these different things that everybody said didn't happen. Then you begin to learn like, oh, okay, is this person going to deal with me honestly and fairly? It just becomes data at that point. Now, here's the thing is they may not be fully emotionally mature. And so you might, depending on the situation, give them a chance they may not know that they need to take some time to think about this. So you might say, look, I want to give you the afternoon to think about this. Let's talk about it tomorrow morning. Give them a chance to cool off. Give them a chance to come into it rationally. Very few people are good at these kinds of conversations. So you want to be a little bit better. And sometimes you do that by helping moderate the emotional intensity of the conversation. Stay curious. It's possible that the information you've been given isn't complete or isn't totally accurate, and they may have more information to give that might be important for you to understand. That is possible. But don't abandon the issue because there's clearly a problem, so you still need to figure out what's going on here, and you still need to push into that. So defensiveness doesn't mean that you automatically disqualify them. It doesn't mean that you should just back down or try to beat them right away, but I would move into a place of curiosity. But if you have objective reasons to confront, then the standard of the bar, I guess, for defensiveness is much higher because it's not just, he said, she said. It becomes a scenario where like, well, we know this happened, this is documented, or whatever. Or we've got 5 different people who have said this, and so this needs to be changed. And that makes defensiveness, it's framed differently, or it comes, the impact is different in that place where in the face of facts, people are saying that didn't happen. Or there's some other information that makes these facts look different. Either way, you want to know what's going on. Now, in those scenarios, if somebody's not changing or they're defending it a little bit, they're not sure they want to change, is I create a fork in the road. There's at least going to be 2 forks. There might be a third option. One is, change, and then these are the benefits. If you're able to grow in this way, then that promotion that you wanted is likely to be possible for you. This relational dynamic, the way you handle clients, the way you handle your team, that is the thing that has prevented me from promoting you in the way that you wanted. So if that changes, I can't see anything that would prevent you from, getting that promotion. Or if you don't change, because you're costing us customers and you're costing us clients, this is not the place. We need to let you go. It's basically, you can choose this, you have a better future, or you choose this, you can have a great future, but not with us. The third option is you can not change. This is, I would say, less around attitude and more around, in most cases, and more around performance. If somebody isn't willing to or able to elevate their performance to the standard that you need or want out of that role, then you could say, okay, there's no change, but you're going to get a lower role. Or you're going to get a more, maybe we can say it this way, a more suitable position, which might be a demotion of some kind, or moved into a department where it's like, okay, technically you're fantastic with people, you're not fantastic. We're going to move you into a role where you just don't work with people, which means you can't be in management. And so that kind of scenario, so you're going to have a limited trajectory here at the company. We still see your value in this way, but if you don't want to work on your people skills, then we cannot put you on this path. So this is the alternative, is we accept that you are the way you are and you don't want to change. So we're going to put you in a space where you're not going to, be hurting and offending people, and you're also not going to be damaging our relationships with our team or our customers. And if that isn't acceptable, then this is not the place for you. You want to make their future very starkly clear, both for your benefit and their benefit. This is also not easy to say, but living in limbo ambiguity land is horrible and it's awful for everybody. And so instead, you just lay it out. This is the way it's going to go. We'll support you at whatever choice you want to make. The choice needs to be made, and we need to start seeing change in the near term. Depending on the scenario, depending on the value of the employee and all of those things, you might want to provide support for them, whether that's internal coaching from another manager or a peer, or external coaching or support. I would only provide that if they really do want to try and grow. If they're being fussy about things and they don't really see it, then as someone who coaches people, I think it's not usually worth the investment. Some people like to do it to say we tried and tick that box. I hate those kinds of coaching engagements. I understand why they want it. I just don't like doing it, because most of those people only change enough to get through the process and on the other side, and then they revert back to their behaviors. That happens, I would say, 9 out of 10 times. And so I don't encourage clients to invest in somebody who's not demonstrating like, oh my goodness, I didn't know they felt that way about me. I feel awful about that. I really want to work well with them. I didn't understand. I thought I was just joking around with them. Yes, I want to. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear like, yes, I want to grow my career, and I didn't realize I was viewed that way, and I don't like being viewed that way, and I want to change. That's the kind of response that you want to hear for this kind of a trajectory. So here's the idea. If you avoid these issues, that creates resentment, and it just accumulates damage. You're accruing toxins, you're accruing problems in the organization by not confronting. However, clear, respectful confrontation can create the possibility of there being real change, real growth, and improvements both with that individual's career and within the organization. So now you have a practical way to confront in a healthy way a senior leader on your team in a way that feels clear, is respectful, and is more likely to create the kind of positive change that you hope for. The point is not to win the confrontation. The point is to create the conditions where truth can be heard, behavior can be changed, and a valuable leader has the opportunity to grow. Now, the basic fact is the healthier the trust is on your team, the easier these conversations become, and fewer of them that you actually need to have in the first place. So I break that down step by step in the video on the screen right now. So click it, and I'll walk you through how to build trust in your team so that you can start to let go.